Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Henry's Lake, Idaho, just 20 miles from the western border of Yellowstone National Park. The terrain here are high mountains interrupted by grassy meadows with elevations between 6,500 and 8,000 feet high. The tall forests here are a combination of pine, fir, and spruce trees, mingled with stands of quaking aspen. Wild berries like serviceberry, thimbleberry, huckleberry, and golden currant fill in a dense undergrowth and provide shelter and food for animals and humans alike. The winters here are cold and snowy, with an average temperature of well below freezing, even during the daytime. Each month of winter averages about 3 inches of snowfall, which can add up to a foot or more near the end of the season. Given its proximity to Yellowstone National Park, you can expect to see moose, mule deer, elk, and pronghorn antelope browsing the meadow edges. The predators of this area include cougars, wolves, coyotes, black bears, and an increasing and spreading population of grizzly bears. Fall is a busy time for people in this area. Locals and visitors pack the mountains in search of game, beginning in late August with archery hunters, then rifle hunters at the beginning of October. Recreation is a key economic driver for communities here, as hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, and hiking draw visitors from around the world to this area. Fall is also a busy time for bears. Black bears and grizzlies are in hyperphagia, which is a metabolic state that increases their drive to find food. Bears will cover miles and miles each day looking for extra calories that will build their fat reserves needed for hibernation and may cause them to deviate from predictable patterns to do so. Just northwest of Henry's Lake is a small cluster of mountains called the Henry's Lake or Lion's Head Mountains, which are part of the Caribou-Targhee National Forest. There are many roads between this area and the national park, which conservationists say limit wildlife travel between ecosystems, but apparently grizzlies didn't get the memo. On the evening of September 30th, 2023, 2 elk hunters were sneaking through the timber in search of the elusive and secretive ungulates. For the sake of this episode, we'll refer to them as Mike and Steve, as their actual identities have not been released to the public. Mike and Steve have formulated a plan to stalk a stand of dark timber and determine the route each of them would plan to travel. They would make sure to be near each other, but far enough apart that elk would find it more difficult to circle around them in the timber. Elk that detect a human scent on the breeze will frequently tiptoe around them while using the breeze to their advantage, and can do this making very little detectable noise. I've had this happen to me many times while stalking elk in central Idaho. As Steve and Mike split up, they carried their hunting equipment as well as a sidearm, but did not pack bear spray. Mike headed along his planned route, and Steve was a little further around the hill and traveling a route that roughly paralleled Mike's. The plan was to meet up at the end of the stalk, or back at camp, to discuss the information gathered during the stalk, if neither man was successful at getting a shot or harvesting an elk. As Steve sneaked through the shadows of the dark timber, he scanned each bush and tree for telltale signs of elk. An outline of an ear, or the white fur on their rump are sometimes all the evidence the animals will provide, as they secret themselves among the bushes. Knowing the habits of game animals is the key to successfully harvesting them. The hunters knew that in the evening the elk would be headed downhill to a water source to fill up after sleeping the day away in shaded beds higher on the mountains. While searching for a sign of elk in the area, Steve examined the trails for tracks and wallows for recent proof of their activity. He decided to continue on his route to the dark timber on the north side of the slope and began working his way toward that location. The brush on the northern slope of most mountains and hills here is more dense than on southern exposures due to longer-lasting accumulations of precipitation. Steve pushed his way through tangles of brush and over deadfall logs while keeping his eyes scanning for scant detail. As Steve crept along, a rustling in the bushes a short distance away caught his attention. He was probably hoping a nice-sized bull elk would emerge and present a broadside shot. But what blurred from the cover was a large sow grizzly, and she wasn't happy to find a human being so close to her, so unexpectedly. Now a little bit about grizzlies and their speed is in order to understand Steve's predicament. They can sprint at over 40 miles an hour, which translates into 44 feet per second. This distance is roughly equal to 15 yards, which means the sow emerging at only 100 feet would be upon Steve in about 2.5 seconds. That isn't much time to consider whether her charge is a bluff or a full-on attack. As soon as Steve's mind could process the bear's presence, he yelled out to Mike to make sure he knew the grizzly was close. That was all it took for the sow to initiate her attack on him. She began advancing toward him, as his hand was already reaching toward his pistol in its holster. The sources I could find regarding this incident did not indicate what caliber, make, or model of firearm Steve was carrying. I would only assume, by the outcome, that it had to be at least a .40 caliber, as a smaller firearm probably would have only injured the grizzly, increasing her aggression and not stopping her. Steve could see the grizzly stretching out her paws with each bound, bringing her dangerously close to him with each one. In a split second, he unholstered his pistol and let fly several shots, each striking the sow as she advanced toward him. By the time the gunshots stopped echoing down the valley, the sow had piled up only a few yards from Steve. He was shaken by the speed at which the sow closed the distance between them, but relieved that her progress was stopped by his focused and proficient use of his sidearm. Steve immediately knew that his elk hunt was over, at least for the time being. The hunters made their way back toward civilization to find a phone. They contacted the Idaho Citizens Against Poaching Group, which is an organization of Idaho citizens focused on preventing or apprehending wildlife poachers. CAP responders contacted the Idaho Fish and Game, who sent an investigative team to the attack site. They conducted a thorough investigation, utilizing the information provided by Steve as well as the forensic evidence, like bear and human tracks, shell casings, and entry wounds on the grizzly's carcass. They determined that the angle of the entry wounds verified Steve's portrayal of things, and decided that he had acted in self-defense. This is an interesting point, because they also indicated that the sow was acting in self-defense when reacting to the man's presence. During this incident, Mike and Steve were uninjured, and the sow grizzly was obviously killed. There was no source indicating that the sow was defending a cached food source, and didn't state that there were cubs present at the time. It appeared that the sow was simply reacting to a human being too close that apparently made her feel threatened. As a hunter, I go into the woods as prepared as I can for a confrontation with a hungry or aggressive predator. I think it is safe to assume that Mike and Steve did the same. If it weren't for Steve's quick reactions in defending himself, he may have been the victim of a bear attack. He may have sustained serious injuries or death at the paws, claws, and teeth of one of the world's most powerful predators. Authorities issued a statement encouraging hunters to carry bear spray, hunt in groups, watch for bear sign like tracks, scat, and digging. Hunters should remove their meat as fast as possible and hang it, as well as trash and food, at least 200 yards from their camp and at least 10 feet off the ground. They also advise that hunters make noise around creeks and streams, as the babbling of the water can drown out their approach. It seems like Steve and Mike followed these guidelines for the most part, which may have prevented a more serious and injurious attack. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think bear spray would have been effective to avoid this attack, or did it happen too fast? Do you think Steve should have waited to see if the grizzly sow was bluffing before firing his pistol? Why do you think Steve and the grizzly ended up surprising each other? Was she napping when he approached? What would you have done if you found yourself in Steve's position and were being charged by an enormous grizzly from close range? I'll be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.